Hello, Year 10. We're here with another online video for our remote learning lessons. So, first, we're going to start continuing with our lessons on Jewish practices. And today, we're going to start with some review questions just to remind us a little bit of from our past, uh, just to review and get retrieval knowledge. So, I want you to answer these four questions. What do Jewish men and women wear when they pray daily? What are three reasons the Shabbat is very special to Jews? Why is the ritual of circumcision so important to Jewish families? And what are bar and bat mitzvahs and why are they important to Jews? So I want you to answer these questions. They are on your Word document that is underneath the video link in Teams. So I want you to answer those questions and then come back, pause this video and then come back for the rest of it, before you do these revision questions as a starter and then come back. So today we're going to be talking about what is the importance and meaning of marriage and the marriage ceremony in the Jewish tradition and Jewish community. Okay, we're going to look at how important marriage is to Jews, how it's celebrated in Orthodox and Reformed faiths. Okay, and then we're going to kind of explain and talk about what these traditions and elements of Jewish marriage and the ceremony mean. Okay, so first what we're going to do is that you're going to answer this discussion question. And again, this discussion question is back on your Word document. And I want you to think about what takes place in Britain, right? Nothing to do with religion, right? It could be religion, but nothing to do with Judaism in Britain. What takes place when a couple gets engaged? Is there any type of celebrations? Is there any type of certain rituals involved? Think about, before we get into what Jews do, what are some things that in Britain, British people do when getting engaged? What are these traditions? What are these rituals that British people do when they're engaged? So pause the video, answer that question, answer it to the fullest, and then come back and continue with our lesson. So today we're going to talk about what is the marriage ceremony in Judaism. So where it comes from is this idea that in Genesis, Adam and Eve, right? Adam and Eve were married, okay? And this idea that God established marriage between a man and a woman. That was written in the Bible, and that's just the culture. Things have changed and been more accepting in today's world, but back thousands of years ago, that was the custom and that was the culture of the time. And it comes from this idea that hence a man leaves his father and mother. It means like when he becomes an adult and clings to his wife so that they become one flesh. That means that they now will become one couple. When a person leaves their home, leaves their family, and now finds a person that they want to kind of share their life with. So in the Jewish tradition, there's two steps in the marriage process. Okay, so first there's betrothal. So betrothal is basically getting engaged, and most Jewish people, in a more traditional sense, in an Orthodox sense, they traditionally have betrothal for about a year before the wedding, and usually they're not living together, they're not seeing each other um, for that long in a more Orthodox, extreme Orthodox church. Um, in more Reformed, they will see each other, they just won't live together, and they usually will not see each other maybe for a couple of days or the night before, or things like that. But first there's the engagement, the betrothal, and then there's the wedding itself. So in the old Jewish tradition, Jewish parents arranged the marriages for their children. So basically, the Jewish parents chose who their children were going to marry. And the old tradition, right, they used somebody called the matchmaker. If you remember, we saw when we were watching some of the Fiddler on the Roof, like picture below, the town had a matchmaker which would set up young children of of the Jewish parents, children who were of marriaging age. The matchmaker would come and find a suitable husband or wife for those teenagers. In some Orthodox Jewish practices, they still do arranged marriages. They still use this idea of a matchmaker, and the whole idea is that the matchmaker is going to find the soulmate and is working on the behalf of God in the Jewish tradition. So this matchmaker is matching up two potential people on working God's work, and it's going to match up soulmates. And because the idea that Jewish believe that marriage is just more than two people living their lives together, two people being intimate and two people being in love, it's also a spiritual bond and a spiritual bond between those two people and their connection to God. So in Jewish faith, marriage is more about the idea of two people coming together, right? And their connection and their growing as a partnership with God. It's a lot of focus on God and less of focus on their own individual connection, like individual intimate relationship. So where you're going to understand a little bit more about this is if you watch the video below. If you watch the video below, it is one of the links that is called Orthodox Marital and Matchmaker. So if you click the video on our link in Teams, if you click the video link that says about Orthodox Matchmaker, that's where you can find this video, and it has an interesting video, which I want you to stop this video and watch that now. Has interesting insight into the idea of the Orthodox and old tradition of matchmaking and how they view getting married. So first, the first part of this is the betrothal. So the betrothal, like I said, is the engagement, and it literally means setting aside, right? Betrothal can translate to another word in Hebrew. That word means set aside. So basically, it means that the couples are setting aside themselves for the other, and no one else is going to be with them. Okay, so it's basically promising themselves to the other person. So in the Jewish law, this idea of betrothal is kind of like a legal status. So they are, even though they're engaged, they are technically acting as if they are married. So the only way that you can end a betrothal and end an engagement is divorce or the person dies. So in both Orthodox and Reformed, there's a betrothal ceremony where they have a wedding contract. So they basically outline different all the different conditions before marriage. So this goes back to like ancient cultural traditions of when uh, there was kind of an exchange. So if the man's family was going to give um, there was going to be an exchange of things, right? So the daughter the basically the wife who's getting married, her family, okay, would kind of give land and give an exchange to have their daughter be married off. So basically they're trying to marry their daughters, and in exchange they would give the man, the man's family or the man himself, land or money or something so that they basically can marry off their daughter. So in Orthodox Jewish traditions, the contract outlines what the husband's going to do, what the people inherit if one of them die, how the children going to be taken care of, right, and how the husband's going to take care of his wife if they get divorced. So basically, this contract is kind of like legally binding rules of what the legal part is if they get divorced. On the Reform Jew side, it's more of like a contract that outlines how they're going to grow together and their spiritual hopes and wishes and in marriage. Okay. So it's more, the Reform Jews is more of a connection together and a promise together. Orthodox, it's more of a traditional. This is what the man has to do. This is what the man gets. This is what a woman has to do. This is what a woman gets. Okay, and for Reform Jews, a big one is that both the partners have to agree on divorce, rather than Orthodox, where usually it'd probably be the male who has to agree whether they're going to get a divorce or not. So next is that was a betrothal, but next is the actual wedding itself, which has a lot of different rituals and traditions and ceremonies. So usually weddings can take place in the synagogue, but they don't always have to. They at least need to be. They can take place in any other places. They need to be led by a rabbi, and basically their wedding ceremonies can't be on the Shabbat. It can't be on religious festivals or religious special days. As long as it's held by a rabbi, and there's a huppah, which is in the middle picture, right? That is basically this archway that the Jewish people get married under, which represents the husband's home and the married couple's new home, it's just kind of like a symbol of the old tradition where basically Jewish people in a certain time would get married in their houses, right? So this just it's a physical representation. It's a symbol of an old tradition, but that they kept. So the huppah, right, is in the second picture, and that's what they get married under. It symbolizes kind of the husband and the wife coming together and being married under their home in their home. Okay, so in this ceremony, the groom stand under the huppah, right, facing Jerusalem, and the bride is brought to him right by her mother. So then the bride goes and walks around the husband, the groom, 7 times, right? There's so many symbolic messages of that. It means the time that the Israelites marched around the city of Jericho 7 times before it was destroyed. There's 7 days, God's creation of 7 days. There's so many different symbols for walking around 7 times, and basically also it could mean that they're going to make space for each other and time for each other in every day of the week. So then they have two blessings, right? They have blessings over wine, and in Orthodox church, the wife gets the ring put on her finger. In Reform, both bride and groom exchange rings. Okay, they basically sign their marriage contract. It's witnessed. They do more blessings. The rabbi blesses them in front of the whole congregation. And as you see in the top right, there's something where at the end, the groom has a glass that's wrapped in cloth, and the groom stomps on the glass with his heel, and everybody watching the ceremony yells Mazel Tov, which means good luck, and their marriage is finalized. Okay, so there's so many different traditions, there's so many different ceremonies, there's so many different rituals that the Jewish people do that has connections with their tradition, their culture, their history, and all of these things happen. So in Orthodox Church, basically the bride and groom, once they leave, now they have a certain time right after the wedding that they go into kind of the private room so they can have a moment together now out away from the whole crowd to as bride and groom. And it's another symbolization, it's another symbolic message of these two people now have become one because they have been apart for so long, and now they can talk with one another. They can share a kiss, right? Now that they are married, and then they come back and they have their reception. As you see in the bottom corner, right, there are certain actions and rituals and traditions that Jewish people have during weddings. So, in a Reformed Jewish wedding, men and women have the wedding together amongst each other, right? And a tradition that is done is that the men in the at their wedding reception will take the groom and put him on a chair, and they sing a certain song, right? And they dance around, and then they lift the groom up in a chair, and they lift him up, right? And then they do the same for a woman, and then they're separate, and then they bring them together, and they kind of they do this tradition right next to each other. So in a Reformed Jewish ceremony or a Reformed Jewish reception, what men and women are basically celebrating together. In an Orthodox Jewish reception, they are divided. So women, literally, it's divided by kind of like a makeshift wall. The women have their celebration of the wedding on their side. The men have their celebration on their side. So it's very segregated. But in the same time, right, there's all these different rituals and celebrations and traditions that they still do and still have. So if you go on to Teams, there's two links for the different wedding ceremonies and different wedding rituals and traditions. One is for Orthodox, one is for Reformed. And in the Reformed one, you get to see a very modern idea of the Reformed synagogue and the Reformed Jewish traditions of same-sex marriages, which is a new thing, and that is something that in Reformed Jews is embraced. Obviously, in Orthodox Jews, it's not really embraced as much because they are very, very stuck in traditional ways. So I want you to watch those two videos, and then I want you to come back to mine. All right. So we've kind of talked about all the different ceremonies, all the different traditions, all the different ideas of the Jewish faith and their idea of marriage ceremonies. Right. So next, I want your task. I want you to go in assignments and click and go back to that Word document that you were working on earlier, and answer all the questions that are on there. Um, Answer all the questions, the task, and even do try the HOTS challenge, which is to your right, which is write down 3 conditions that you would want in your marriage contract, right? And explain why. So if you were to have a marriage contract, kind of that as the Jewish community does in their wedding ceremony, um, what would you want those conditions to be? That's just an extra insightful kind of challenge question. But please complete all of those questions that are on there. Please watch all the videos. Hopefully this video was a little bit more helpful. You got to have me explain, you got to hear my voice, and I hope that you continue working hard, and I will see you next time.